Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's so great to see you all. It's nice to be back. I think tonight's recipe is going to be delicious, and you won't mind if it's a little extra runny because it's so good with all that saffron. You all know the drill. We're seeing a beautiful sunset after all this rain today from the live webcam out at Dollarhide. It's nice to see the clear sun and give the rain a little time to sink in. It's been great here today. We love that rain. I know, Robert, it's a little dreary, but we need rain. We're farmers. We like our rain. And we're pretty excited about that. So thank you all for joining us. You know the business. Click on the button for the participants on the right-hand side. Raise your hand. Stay muted until you do raise your hand. Click on the chat. Post your questions. There's going to be a lot of great information on the chat tonight. So we want to see you paying attention a little bit to that, because I think you're going to find some stuff you want to know about a little bit later. We have Greg Loki joining us tonight, and Greg is one of the top 97 percentile chess players. And he is going to tell us a little bit about chess and how to get a good game going, whether we're home alone or we're home with friends and we're trying to learn, or we're experts. Just a little something to break up the binge watching on Netflix to get us all ready to roll. And so we're excited to get started. I see some of our Floridians are joining us. We've got Sunnyvale, we've got Seattle, and some of our regulars. So do share where you're coming from today, and if you've made Chef Todd's recipe, or you're going to make it right after you hang up with us. So we want to know a little bit more on what's going on. We might pick on you even a little bit. So without any further ado, I saw Michael Scholz was there at the Rutherford Vineyard. Let's get started with Michael. I saw how beautiful it was looking, and assistant winemaker Angus running up the stairs in all his glory with his little warm doggy coat on. So it is a little bit chilly here. But I know this is the happiest time of year for you, Michael. There's rain, and we really didn't have any rain last year. So tell us how it's looking, how much we're measuring, how the lakes look, what's going on?
Yeah, rain is a good thing. We're always happy. This time of year, we're happy to get some rain, particularly this year where it's been a little shy. Of course, 2020 was a very dry year, and this last winter has been very dry. So this last few days I've had some significant storms come through, and that gives me a little relief, because I'm thrilled to see it. We're farmers here, and you know, with farming we need sunshine, but we also need some rain to fill our lakes. But yeah, so we've had about 2¼ inches in the last 48 hours, and that's pretty good. That's pretty nice. We need some more. I'd like some more, but always be happy with what you have.
Yeah. And are we seeing about the same amount of water from both of your weather stations, both Dollarhide and Rutherford, or are we getting a little more rain up there?
We're actually getting a
Michael?
Just a hint more, but it's flipped around the other way for the last 36 hours, where Dollarhide's been getting just a touch more.
Yeah. So
this is our weather stations here, right? Actually.
Yeah. So tell us how you use that to measure moisture all year long.
Yeah. So the weather stations tell us a number of different indices. Obviously, the clear ones are temperature and rainfall. They're all, of course, very important, but also wind direction, humidity, soil moisture. All these types of things to help us have an understanding of what's happening at the moment, and depending on the time of season, it is when it becomes more or important, or what have you, and allows us to make decisions at that point in time regarding that information. So it's pretty important stuff.
Are you using the soil probes now for measuring moisture, or do you just really watch that as we get further into the season?
Yeah, the soil probes are really more for the growing season, when we've actually got green growth on the vine and the shoots are pushing and what have you, or we have grapes in the vines, any of that time during the growing season, because we want to be aware of what volume of moisture is in the soil that's available to the plant. And that's the time of year the plant's using it. And we also want to be judicious about using the water that we have. It's kind of a precious resource. So we don't want to apply water to a vine unnecessarily. And the soil moisture allows us to be aware of whether there's moisture available to the plant or sort of gives us a sense of how much stress that plant's under. And we actually don't mind having our plants under a little stress. So being aware of the amount of water there is important, but then we need to relieve that periodically depending on the conditions. And so it allows us to do minimal irrigation.
Well, I think it's really interesting. When we talked earlier today, you said, you know, we'd had a little over 2 inches of rain, and we were working on the river restoration project and getting that done in November. And we took some great footage of that. And you can see the river that cuts through Dollarhide Ranch was totally dry. And you're telling me right now that the base of the river that we're looking at here in the picture is just wet. We're not even getting any pooling or flow in the river yet. You know, that feels a little behind for this time of year.
Yeah, it's way behind. Yeah, that's the river restoration project. It's part of in 2018 and more so in 2019, we had very large storm events and actually washed out a big part of the riverbank. So we needed to go and repair it. So after obtaining multiple permits to allow us to go in and do this to avoid further damage and to save that bridge that you see at the end there, we went and did the river restoration. And you're right. But yes, you're correct. That we normally would have water running in the river at this time, so it's particularly late this year. But we kind of need, and that's a shot of one of the previous years of the river running, of course, which is always a good scene. But we need, getting close to a season's total of almost 10 inches of rain to get the river to flow, and we're not there yet because this winter has been so dry. And we measure the season from about July last year through to now. So at the moment we just haven't got to that place. And of course we still have a few months of potential winter and storm activity ahead of us, and so we keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, I've never seen our lakes in my 12 years at St. Supéry so low with this drought season that we've had. And of course, we've had a pretty cool season for frost. So I'm hoping you get plenty of water, because this is our only source of water is the rain that we use at Dollarhide. So we'll need that for frost protection moving forward. So also, we are getting some rain. We had the fires this year. You've been working hard on erosion control and that sort of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about how the cover crop and everything looks? Does it look good holding up with this? 2 inches is a lot in a couple days.
Yeah. No, 2 inches is quite a lot. No, things are looking quite good out at the ranch and here at Rutherford also. Every year we do quite a lot of preparation in anticipation of storms to avoid erosion. So we go and check our channels, our water lines and what have you, make sure they're clear of debris. We check our culverts and do the same thing. We've done an enormous amount of work this year on those things. If we've got areas we're concerned about, we'll actually spread straw across the soil surface. And what that straw does, just spread it around, and it stops the water from traveling too quickly. And basically fast water erodes ground. So if we can slow that water travel down, we can reduce that erosion and hopefully eliminate it. We also use wattles, which are kind of bars that do the same thing. They'll slow that water travel down. We check our drains and our terraces, make sure they're not obstructed and ready to go. So do all those things. And at the end of the day, we're trying to, erosion ends up at the lowest point. The lowest points are rivers. And so we don't want erosion anywhere in the property. It's just good farm management. But we certainly don't want that mud getting down into the rivers, because that'll impact the water quality, and an impact on water quality impacts marine life. And we don't want to do that. We want to maintain our whole environment in a healthy status.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important for maintaining our fish-friendly farming certification, our Napa Green certification, and all of that. So we're drinking the 2018 vintage of Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc tonight. Some folks are drinking the 2019. Can you give a comment on the two vintages that we're having, and the weather from those vintages, and sort of how the differences there in the glass?
2018 was quite a nice vintage. A season that yielded slightly larger crops. The winter presented pretty good rainfall and what have you, and it had a fairly warm summer. 19, the winter was really heavy in storms and rain, so we're actually had a really fortunate year of capturing water that year. And we had them in the early part of the season, the year we didn't have a lot of rain. Then in April, May, we had more. Of course, in 19, that late rain impacted flowering, and that in flowering impacted yields. When you get rain at flowering, it's not such a good thing from a yield perspective. However, quality was spectacular, and what have you. So both really good years. And the summer in 19 was a little more mild. So, you know, differences in the seasons certainly, but not dramatic. But that's what we had going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got a few questions here on the chat. A lot of people have made Chef Todd's recipe, which is fantastic. And Tom and Paula are asking why we have limited quantities of rosé this year because of the vintage, of course. So Tom, we did not make any rosé in 2020. So the 2019 is the last you're going to see until the 2021 vintage. Just because of the fires, we hadn't picked any red wines before those hit. And so we were unable to pick any red wines for the 2020 vintage. There's just a tiny bit of Sauvignon Blanc. But some exciting news. We will be importing from Domaine de Ile, a beautiful island up the coast of Provence and part of Provence, from our sister property there, the Chanel Rosé. And so we will have that available from St. Supéry. We can ship it to about 22 states directly and let you know where it is. So hopefully we'll be satisfying your rosé with our sister property, Domaine de Ile, which is really a fantastic, very elegant rosé that you'll see coming soon. So don't give up hope. We're here for you, but none of Michael's rosé this year, and we'll be looking forward to that. So, you know, many of you have been binge watching. Perhaps you won't admit it. Perhaps you will. And many of you have been watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix and have been getting a little bit of a hankering to play some chess. Perhaps remembering how fun it was to play stuck inside in the SIP, pulling out the board games. And so we invited our friend Greg Loki to join us today to talk about playing chess, getting started playing chess, and some tips and tricks. Greg very generously has been teaching beginner chess to any adult who would like to learn online on Zoom during the SIP, just to sort of spread the word and the joy. And Greg, thanks so much for joining us today. And I really want to talk to you about the Queen's Gambit and sort of what you, how Hollywood has changed the view of chess for all of us.
Well, you know, Hollywood only tells the truth about everything. But actually, two things that really stood out when I watched the movie were that the moves were made very fast, like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And that was, I guess, like poetic license. They had to do it to make the movie not be totally boring. But actually in tournaments, like on the caliber of the players we were supposedly watching, they have 2 hours to make their first 40 moves. So they may take a half an hour for one individual move, maybe even more. The other thing that really stood out that was not realistic was that the heroine was using drugs, probably not heroin itself, but other drugs, and she was often drunk. And nobody could play at that level with either you know, if binging on either drugs or on any kind of alcohol. But otherwise, there were a lot of things that were very realistic. I watched a very interesting video that was put on by a guy, I don't remember his name, it was on YouTube. He had a Russian accent, which was appropriate for talking about chess. And he was talking about the game that was on the show as the final game. I won't tell you who won because don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. But it was fascinating to watch him with the accent and all, as he was talking about the fact that this was a real game between two masters. And they only deviated near the end for some reasons that I won't reveal, and you can watch the show. And if you want me to give you the link for that YouTube video, you can send me a message. My email address and phone number will be posted somewhere along the line here. So anyway, those were but it was largely realistic, and it was certainly fascinating.
Well, it's fun to know that they did use some real games and real action for the chess enthusiasts. So tell us a little bit, if for those of us who haven't gotten started playing chess yet, some tips and places to get started.
The way to have the most enjoyable entrance into the world of chess is to get some knowledge before you sit across the board from anybody, even your kid. There are two ways to do that. You can go to classes, and I offer classes for free on Zoom to adults only. And that's one way. You may find there's chess clubs in your area. So there's a lot of alternatives where you can find some lessons. And the other alternative is to view chess books. And I looked at some of the beginner chess books on Amazon, and found 3 of them. I scanned a bunch of them, and the 3 that I thought were best, I think Ryan is going to post here. 3 that all have similar titles: Chess for Beginners, one by a guy named Capuana, and this one is free if you have the Kindle version is free if you have Amazon Prime, and the next one is also free. I think it's free. By Game Nest. That's an organization, not an individual's name. And the third one is by an individual, and it is $2.99 on Kindle if you are an Amazon Prime member. So all 3 of these cover a lot of the basic stuff. In order to have a satisfying introductory experience to chess, you need to know a little bit about the opening. There are some basic principles, like you want to develop your pieces in the first 10 moves. That means put them in the good spots where they can do something. And you want to try to get some control of the center. You want to castle your king. There's a few principles that are pretty basic. And if you just sit down at your first chessboard and you have no knowledge about it, oh my God, I've played new games before, like Japanese chess. I had no idea what to do. So it's best if you get some of these principles down, you can start a game. And then also in the lessons that I give, and on some of these books that I just displayed, they then go into the middle game. There are certain tactics and techniques. It's good to learn what those things are. I don't know if any of these beginner books talked about the end game, but there are certainly books on that subject as well. So if any of you are interested in joining in the Zoom sessions that I offer on Wednesdays at 5:45 Pacific time, feel free to send me an email. And so anyway, those are my recommendations. Get some knowledge before you start. Of course, you can always jump in, but it may be frustrating.
Yeah, and best ways to start your chess game?
In the opening, there are a bunch of principles. The most important thing is to get your weakest pieces developed early, your knights and your bishops, and also move 2 or 3 pawns, trying to get some control of the center, and castling your king. That's putting it off to the side in a safe spot. There are a number of other principles, all of which are important, but those are the 3 most important, and they're not really intuitive. Most beginners that haven't had any training make certain mistakes that are like so typical, and they immediately lose material. So you can avoid those mistakes if you get some of these introductory ideas.
So what about playing, if we're staying at home in the shelter in place, how can we play online, or what are some tips for good places to play online?
First of all, there are many chess apps that will actually play games on your phone, on your computer. I don't recommend that for a beginner because it's so frustrating, because they're all so strong. You're going to lose every time and not even know why. So you may want to look at a couple very good chess sites that are online where you can play against human beings. One is called chess.com. This is their homepage. You can play games there. You can also do puzzles. They have a bunch of learning features. You can use a lot of the features for free when you sign up. I pay $99 a year because I get some of the more advanced features, which I really like. It's a great site. The second one is called lichess.org. That's lichess.org. And it is different from chess.com. It has some features that I like as a trainer. They're both great. So the one thing they both have in common is you can play chess any time of day, 3 a.m. you wake up, you can't sleep, you can go play chess. I've done that before. So anyway, those are a couple of good things, and I think both of those are better. If you get, they're better than playing against the computer. When you sign up on either of these two sites, if you choose to, I recommend you create an ID, play under that ID, and then when you lose games, your rating will go down, and pretty soon you'll find out what your real rating is, so you can start playing people of a similar rating. It's frustrating to go in and play somebody who's way, way better than you. You lose every time. So when you find out what your rating is, you can find people of approximately equal ability.
And just, one kind of last question. Tell us a little bit about how technology has sort of changed over time with chess and, how it's been moving forward.
Well, computers have a big advantage over human beings. They process a whole lot faster. So the way computers work is essentially they just create these branches. Just imagine a tree breaking up into all kinds of branches and sub-branches, et cetera. So they can go out with their tremendous speed and look at every move, and then every move after that, every move after that, every move after that. And with their tremendous capacity, they can look in, 6 or 8 or more moves ahead. And then they have to evaluate which of those options prove to be best. The result of this capability and the increasing horsepower of the machines themselves is that as early as 1997, a computer called Big Blue beat the world champion, who was Garry Kasparov at that time. So that is phenomenal. When I first played against computers back in the 70s, they were incredibly bad. I couldn't lose if I tried. But the ones I have now are extremely good. Even the ones you get on your phone are so good that I don't play them because they beat me almost every time. So not the ideal thing for a beginner to do, but it's nice that you always have that option. The websites, in my opinion, are far better.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for the tips, and we're going to post those to everyone. And thank you also for your generous offer to teach some chess to folks and break up the sip a little bit for people and give them a new skill. Robert's saying he remembers his Atari chess on the 2600, getting it to a stalemate when he was a teen. And that is a lot of fun. Go Atari. Love that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to you, Emma, and to Supéry. And everybody, I hope somebody here may get some value out of this and get into chess and get a break from COVID. Thanks again.
Thank you. And feel free to post any questions for Greg. He's hanging out with us, drinking some Saint Supéry with us all tonight. So you all know who've been joining us before how I just love our Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc. So Michael, let's talk a little bit about the evolution of this wine. I mean, you've been at Saint Supéry for a long time, and this Parcel 5 is super special to you. And so you want to talk a little bit about this vineyard that this comes from, and how you evolved this wine when you came back to Saint Supéry in 2009.
Absolutely. So let's just, I will do that. Let's just chat about the aromatics of this wine before we get into the vineyard and what have you. As I look at this wine, and hopefully you guys have this in the glass there, and I have the 2019, but the wines are very similar from vintage to vintage. I'm seeing a lot of those sort of guava qualities, pink grapefruit, which is very typical of our vineyard. We see a little bit of that sort of fennel quality in the aromatics, a bit of that char from the toasted barrel that we use, and a little of those yeast complexities. So if anyone's tasting that wine, send me some notes and tell me what your flavor or aromatic profiles are as well. Look, the Parcel 5 is our oldest parcel of Sauvignon Blanc at the ranch, and as a winemaker, I'm really fortunate to have that. So it just so happens that it just is a parcel that creates these wines with incredible intensity of flavor, tremendous sort of type, and tremendous grapefruit, green lime, citrus qualities, and what have you. It's incredibly consistent from year to year, but just has this purity of fruit and the great intensity of expression. And it's actually become the mother source of our vineyards developed since like 1998. We've been developing vineyards, and we typically take the wood from this block to create this wine, Emma. Indeed.
Awesome. Well, Robert's getting a little apricot from it, and Jamie's asking if you could talk about this and the difference between this and the Semillon that we had a little bit earlier, and the other, and Lynn's also asking if you can talk about the other Sauvignon Blancs that you make. So maybe just start with a little review of the Sauvignon Blancs that we make and the differences. I think might answer everybody's questions there.
Sure. So we make, at St. Supéry, we make 3 Sauvignon Blancs. It's a really important varietal to us. They're very much about what we're about with our white wine program. So we make the estate Sauvignon Blanc, and that's a wine that doesn't have any oak integration at all. It's actually stainless steel tank fermented. And the beauty of doing that is it allows you to capture the vibrance and the fruit and the expression of exactly what that grape from that vineyard is, because there's no influence from anything else. When we make that wine, we make it to have that vibrance and that freshness within the wine. Well, the Dollarhide, we also make a concrete fermented Sauvignon Blanc. We maintain the same sort of approach towards fruit drive and what have you, but we bring in some more complexity that concrete tank fermenter will contribute. And that complexity typically is sort of, it brings on a little more of a feel of a slight salinity, very subtle, so wet stone, that wet sort of forest river stone sort of quality and what have you. Quite interesting, a little complexity. And actually with that wine, we thread a tiny bit of Semillon into it. But with the Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc that we have tonight, like the estate Sauvignon Blanc that's tank fermented, this is 100% Sauvignon Blanc. The core of this wine is also tank fermented to capture that vibrance of fruit and what have you. But we take typically about 17% of the wine and we barrel ferment it. And that barrel ferment gives a little more texture, a little more fatness, and a little more complexity to the wine. So they're the 3 Sauvignon Blancs: the estate Sauvignon Blanc, the concrete Sauvignon Blanc, and the Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc we have tonight. As for the Semillon, Semillon is quite a cool varietal. We don't see it much here in California, or when it is seen, it's often in a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and not really spoken about very much. But Semillon's is sort of a great partner to Sauvignon Blanc, but on its own, it's a wine that's a little more subtle than Sauvignon Blanc, a little more shy, but has great sort of fruit expressions of lemon essence, sort of lemon butter qualities, those sort of things. It's a wine that has good palate feel and sort of textural feel and weight across the palate. It carries a little less acid than Sauvignon Blanc, so it's a little softer on the palate. But that's Semillon. It's not, whereas Sauvignon Blanc is more grapefruit and lime driven, Semillon is more sort of lemon essence driven. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And we also barrel ferment our Semillon, which is a big difference.
Yeah, big difference. You know, I think kind of my favorite part when you came back to St. Supéry in 2009, other than getting to work with you, was what you did with the Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc. You know, we talked about how to really elevate it to the next level, and you know, you took a little nod from the past with the, you know, looking at the old Mondavi Fumé Sauvignons that we would see, and a little nod to the future of St. Supéry and what we wanted to do. And I think kind of my favorite thing that happened with this wine we were first making in 2009, you came into my office and said, here, try this, you know, these Sauvignon Blancs, you know, here's the little 7% barrel fermented, and it's really, really great. I'm like, oh yeah, that's really nice. And, you know, we tried it without the barrel fermentation. I'm like, yeah, we really, really like that. And then you came back a few days later and it was 9%. You came back a few days later and it was 11%. And, you know, we were kind of going along. And so when you bottled it and I opened it, I was talking about the wine and I'm like, oh, well, you know, this wine is great. It's got 11% barrel fermentation. And you're like, no, it's 16 now. Because you just keep playing with it. And tweaking the wine a little bit. And so that attention to detail, you know, is really remarkable. We talk a lot about how old vines help red wines. We talk a lot about how blending help red wines. And really this Sauvignon Blanc is benefiting from those same things. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. Listen, old vines are pretty cool. I mean, we talk about it with the red wines, like you say, more often than white, but they have some magic for all whatever flavor you're talking about. They have some magic. Old vines typically create wines that have great integrity and intensity of fruit flavor, integrity, stayability. You know, it's like in the cellarability and what have you. And with the Sauvignon Blanc, particularly from these old vines, we see great consistency as well. And so they bring really intense aromatics, intense flavor profile, and very consistent from year to year. Consistency is to be expected because they're the same plants growing in the same dirt year by year by year. And so when you have that situation, they're consistent anyway. But these old vines, they typically bring just a little bit more punch, a little bit more power, a little bit more excitement to the wine. The yields sort of decrease over time. So you don't keep old vines if diminishing yields bother you. But for us at St. Supéry, we have a great respect for old vines, and it's not so much about the yield as it is the quality and what they can produce. And this particular block, this is a fantastic place.
Well, it's a really delicious wine. I love this wine. So, of course, I love all our wines, but this is one that if you drop by the house, you'll definitely find us serving quite regularly, as well as all of our wines. But this one, there's definitely a couple bottles in the refrigerator just in case we get a visitor, which these days we're really grateful when we get a visitor. But let's pop over to the kitchen and see what Chef Todd has cooking. I see a question here that Maureen was wondering if we still make Chardonnay, and we've actually ripped out the Chardonnay after the 2018 vintage, and Michael's been working really hard to plant some Cabernet there. So that's what's happening. Jamie, can you visit Dollarhide is the question. Well, we were just talking today that we just got the results of the annual Audubon Society bird count that occurs on January 1st every year at the ranch. And we had over, I think it was 137 different species of birds. It's an incredible location. So if you are a birder, we are going to put together a January visit to Dollarhide Ranch to look at those birds. This year they found a burrowing owl, which I am super excited about, and lots of other great sightings of waterfowl and other birds. So we can do that. And we do arrange some special visits to the ranch that we do often for charity events around the country. So watch for those as well. And for our club members, we do put together the occasional special visit, but a winter birding visit is in the cards for next January, and hopefully some fun visits in the summertime. So watch for that. And of course, we are focusing on Fish Fridays in the summertime when we're open at the winery, which we are open again here in the rain outdoors. So we look forward to seeing you socially distanced, of course, soon. So to Chef in the kitchen, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen for a little glimpse of a simple recipe, perfect for warm winter nights when you think about how chilly it is. This is something that can be very brothy, kind of warming, and really focusing on some sustainable seafood, which I always love to do, especially when we are featuring our Sauvignon Blanc. The wine with all the richness and the bit of oak in there and that creamy texture and everything goes really well with, I think, clams. Also can go with some mussels. They're fantastic. Any of the mollusk family, these will work really well. This recipe is pretty quick and easy to put together. There are a couple of really unique and interesting ingredients that you would either have to source or start way in advance. So I'll kind of just go through some of those. The recipe itself, I'm utilizing some of our own citrus from our garden. And what I've been doing lately is preserving our Meyer lemons because we're getting so many beautiful, fantastic, really fragrant Meyer lemons. They've got that sweetness and that kind of perfume that I really want to preserve or save. And so what I'm doing is I've taken some of the lemons themselves, I cut them into quarters and then stuff them with some salt and then pack them into a canning jar, a preserving jar. And essentially what I'm doing is getting them to go through a slight fermentation and then kind of lacto ferment and preserve themselves all in. So this was one that I just started from the 2020 vintage this year. And it won't be ready actually for maybe about 3 to 4 to 5 months. That's when I really like to use them. What happens is the salt really cures the zest on the outside, and it brings out more of the actual aromatics in it. So you really get the perfume, but you also, because of the salt that's in there, it tones down any of the slight bitter that you might pick up in the white lining, the pith, that part in there. So it makes it very fragrant. This is something that you find in probably Morocco, North Africa, Mediterranean cuisine. They use them quite a bit. You might find it used as a traditional ingredient in some of the tagine dishes that you'll find with some beautiful chicken and some green olives and preserved lemon. I like to use it in all different ways, even putting a little bit of some of the salty lemon juice that's in here into my Caesar salad dressing to kind of kick it up just a bit. What I really want to do is just utilize the beautiful zest that's on the outside. And you can find the Meyer lemons or the preserved lemons. You can find them now in a lot of specialty stores. And so you might find that. Here's the zest that I have. All the white has been taken off. And I've chopped up the rest of it so it's all ready to go into my steamed clam dish that I'm doing tonight. The other items that are really interesting and unique here is saffron. Now, if you haven't had saffron before, it's really unique, very specialized. It is probably the #1 most expensive food product that you can get. And it's a spice, basically, that comes from crocus flower. And this specific crocus flower, crocus sativa, will shoot up 3 of the actual stigmas that will come up from the top there. And you pull those, they would harvest those. They grow very low to the ground. So as you can see in the beautiful pictures there, it's really backbreaking work. It's very tedious where you have to get in there and just pull those 3 little beautiful red threads out. And then from there, they are sorted, they are dried, and eventually all that weight and all of the accumulation of it can be used in a lot of traditional dishes. And so in Spain, where they also have some fantastic saffron, they may use it in their paella as a traditional thing. You might find it in the south of France in bouillabaisse. And all throughout the Middle East and in through Persia, those regions there, Kashmir is known as one of the best places for the top quality of saffron. They use it into their soups, into their rice. They use it into some of their teas and drinks and things like that. Incredibly expensive. A little bit goes a long way. There's some sources that you can find it from. Make sure that you get the actual threads that you can see. They should be deep red in color. They might have a little bit of that bright burnt orange, kind of golden threads that are in there as well. And when they hit a liquid or when you heat them up, once they hit that liquid, they will permeate and send their not only the aroma and the taste, but also the beautiful color. That's what they're known for. You might have seen risotto Milanese, and that beautiful golden yellow color comes out in there as well as the flavor. So this is a really kind of a specialized type of a product. I think it goes really well with Sauvignon Blanc. There's a certain that green kind of slightly grassy along with the flowery tones that you pick up in saffron. I think it's a fantastic combination, especially with some beautiful sustainable seafood. So the seafood that I have actually this time around is some Manila clams. And I got these from our sustainable seafood supplier. These happen to be Manila clams. They're small, they're very sweet. They have a real intensity of umami. What I did to prepare these initially the first time is to actually take them and soak them in some really cold water with some sea salt in there. So I made it fairly salty, almost like the ocean, like the seawater that they came from. And I let them soak in there and I agitated them and kind of stirred them around a little bit so that they start to filter through. As they take the water in, they're also filtering out any sand or any grit. And so I would let them sit in that cold water and stir them every once in a while, every few minutes or so. And eventually what they do is they purge themselves so you don't have any of that sandy grit that's in there. So that's an important thing to do. You want to make sure that the clams themselves, they are closed and they're tight. That's a good sign. That means they're happy. They're all closed. If you happen to find some that are starting to open a little bit, they might be gasping for water instead of gasping for air. And so if they're open, you might want to squeeze them just a touch or give them a tap, just a gentle tap. And if they close back up, they're still fine to use. That means they're still alive. But once they're open and gaping and they don't close back up, then just discard them so you don't get any kind of foodborne illness or sick from eating them. The clams themselves, just have them cleaned, all ready to go. You don't want to necessarily freeze them or pack them on too much ice because they can freeze. And you also don't want to store them in water or fresh water because they're not naturally from fresh water, so that would actually kill them. So just keep them nice and cold. I had damp paper towel over mine. So make sure that you keep them covered, newspaper, anything like that, nice and cold, and they're all prepped up and ready to go. So the other ingredients that I have and set aside here on the recipe is some key ingredients, and that is in the form of the saffron, #1. I also took the liberty of playing with some saffron in some of our Sauvignon Blanc, and I made a reduction or a concentration where I put the saffron into some white wine, and I cooked it down into a syrup, and then I actually mixed it in with some sea salt. So these coarse grained crystals of sea salt now have some of the acid, they have a little bit of the flavor, but they also have that beautiful color. And I'm going to use this as my seasoning in here. Obviously, if you don't have that, you can just use standard salt or sea salt, and just a little bit in here. Even though you have clams that come from the ocean or from the salt water, you're still going to need a little bit of seasoning. Here's some heavy cream for richness. That's going to add a nice mouthfeel and the creaminess, which plays well with the oak. Some of the aromatics that you absolutely will want to have are some garlic. This happens to be from our garden. Here's some chopped shallots. I love the combination of the two of those with clams or any kind of seafood that's steamed. I also have from our garden some Italian parsley and some fennel. There was actually some wild fennel that I ran across in the garden, and I love that slight anise flavor that you pick up in there, because I do pick up some in the aroma on the Sauvignon Blancs here. It's one of the characteristics, as well as the citrus. And so all of the preserved lemon that I have chopped up there is we're ready to go. And then I also took the fennel bulb and I shaved it very thin. So now I have a little crunchy bits that will also give a little texture to that as well. So I'm going to utilize that in with the steaming. I do have a pot that will hold enough of the clams in there. That's about a pound, just over a pound of clams. And I have a lid that will actually go over, tight fitting lid that fits perfect so that all the steam is concentrated. What I'm going to do is go ahead and start it up. And initially what I want to do is kind of wake up the aromatics a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I have some of our white wine, and you probably have a bottle open. So if you can part ways with maybe about 3 ounces, 4 ounces worth, it's well worth it. And it creates a natural bridge in the sauce, in the broth, when you go to take a sip of your wine. So what I'm going to do is wake up some of the aromatics here. So by turning on the heat, I'm going to warm up and bring that wine up to about a simmer. I'm going to add in my tablespoon worth of garlic, a couple teaspoons worth of chopped shallots. So this will kind of flavor the base. And I'm also going to put in some of my chopped zest from the preserved lemons, maybe about a teaspoon or so there. So there is a salty component to it. There's a lot of different ways that you can utilize that. I actually took some of our Meyer lemons and I infused into an olive oil. So I took some of the Meyer lemon zest on the outside and I warmed it up in some extra virgin olive oil. So I have some that I'm going to use just to finish and drizzle over the clams itself. All the wonderful Mediterranean type flavors here are going to be fantastic. So this mixture here is coming up to a simmer. I don't know if you can see that. It's going to come up to simmer and bring everything up to a bloom. I'll hold off on just adding the saffron until I'm just about ready to add everything else in. Here's some wonderful spinach. I love the color and the texture. I have 2 different types that our gardener, Bree Hoover, grew for us. And so I have some Bloomsdale spinach, kind of earthy. It has a nice nuttiness to it. It is lighter on the astringency and the tannin. It has a little bit less of the oxalic acid. This really fun looking one here with the red veins in it is called red kitten spinach. So I'm going to put both types of them in here as well. And that wilts down. I'll just leave them on the whole, so I don't have to do anything else. Now that this is actually kind of coming up to a simmer, I'm going to go ahead and put in fennel. And that's an optional thing. I really like it and I happen to have it, so I'm going to capitalize on that. I will put in just a tiny bit of my saffron infused sea salt. Just a little bit goes a long way. Sea salt is stronger. There we go. And then I'm going to put in my cream. It's about 2 ounces worth. And I'll bring that up to a simmer. And then the rest of the ingredients are going to cook up very quickly once this all comes up to a nice bloom there.
Looks fantastic as always, Chef. We've got
the clams will cook up very quickly. All I want to do once they do hit that hot temperature and I close them is get them to pop open. As soon as they open, that's it. I don't want to cook them any longer. They will shrivel up a little bit too far and they will get tough. They might even fall out of the shell if they're overcooked a little too far. So you have to be careful with that. There we go. You can see that the cream and the wine liquid is all blooming now. And if you can watch this, just a pinch of saffron, which some people say could be anywhere from 25 to 50 individual strands. Let's see if you can see that wonderful color. All of a sudden, it's so it's starting to bloom in there. As it hits the heat, it will steep out in there, and you just leave those strands in. Great color, fantastic flavor. Now that we have that in, you can smell it. I'm going to go in with the fresh Italian parsley, some of the fennel tops, and I'm going to put in my spinach, whole leaves.
Beautiful. I love spinach and everything. It's kind of like cheese for me.
I do too. A little nutrition in there as well. If it does give off just a little bit of the chlorophyll in there, that's okay. The color still should be very vibrant. So now that the clams are in there, I'm ready to put the lid on, and it really won't take all that long. I don't think you necessarily need to shake the pot or anything. Just kind of let that intense heat, that steam generate through. It'll push through. And then all you have to do is plate it all up. So it's a quick kind of a dish, which I love. And I think it's fairly simple. As long as you've got your ingredients all chopped up and everything all ready to go, your clams are all soaked, and you can have those all cleaned, ready to put in. But the actual cooking process is very quick. So by the time you pop your bottle of wine open, you have your glass of wine while you are chopping up the vegetables and washing the clams and rinsing them. The next glass or some goes into the actual dish, and then you've got the rest of it all to go into your pot here. So it shouldn't take all that long. You might start to see some steam vent out from the side. That means that you've got enough heat going on in there. You can do a quick check. Some of them are just starting to pop, so it's just a matter of a few seconds here. Now, one thing that I love to do is to have all that beautiful broth that's flavored with the clams and all those aromatics, along with some wonderful bread. And so we happen to have our own sourdough starter that I started here back probably in August. I think I started that up from some of our grapes that are right outside in the vineyards. All right, almost all open. A little bit of a shake, almost there. And then from that starter, I'm basically experimenting and making our own sourdough bread. So I have it in two different forms. From an older loaf that I made a day ago, I basically sliced up the day-old bread into some thick pieces and then toasted it with some olive oil. And then a fresh one that I made earlier today is just thick sliced fresh. So either way, it's all delicious when it comes to dunking in and sopping up all those wonderful juices and all the broth there.
Todd, got some questions coming in from our live streaming on Facebook and Instagram.
Perfect. Yes, please.
Would you serve this over pasta or just as is? I heard rice pilaf on the side was a suggestion someone else did.
All great ideas. Yes. If you wanted to turn this into much more of a substantial meal, maybe you leave some of the bread off and you don't sop up half of a loaf like I would do. What you might want to do is and you can see here's all the clams are just opened up, and they're nice and plump. They haven't necessarily fallen away from the shell or shrunk up too much. And so, yes, you could definitely put this over some linguine. You know, there's definitely the beautiful clams and linguine. I'm going to go ahead and lift out all of the clams and the garnish and put them in here. And then what I'm going to do is return this pan with all the broth and kind of concentrate it down just a little bit more. So I'm going to put it back on the heat just to kind of cook it a little bit stronger. Now, the nice part about these, since I had good quality clams and they were all vibrant and alive, and I soaked them and washed them really well, there's no accidental mud bombs in there. Sometimes you can find some that have actually been consumed or eaten and the shells are empty. But what happens is, since they are buried deep in the sand, they end up holding sand in there, and they can ruin the whole entire pot that you have, because the sand will dissipate and get all over into everything. And there's nothing you can really do from that point. But if you buy from a great source, then you should have no issue with that, especially washing them and soaking them. That would point out any of the ones that aren't necessarily good.
Well, I'm just going to jump back to the crocuses for a second. You know, my husband and I grew some saffron crocuses in our garden here in Napa. And, you know, they were successful, but I got to tell you, it takes an awful lot of crocuses to try and get a few strands, and really perhaps not worth the effort, but it was a fun foodie thing to do. And I do believe that there's some local sourcing where they are growing crocuses here, Todd.
There is some. I did find a local source that's doing some organic farming, maybe about an hour and a half away in Kelseyville, north of us towards Clear Lake. And they are actually growing and selling some saffron and saffron byproducts, some oils and extracts and things like that. But it is one of those ventures that is fun. They're beautiful flowers. Don't think that you can turn it into a real viable business unless you have a incredibly huge plot of land. Here, I'm just pouring that concentrated broth right over the top of the clams. Just as an idea here, just to let you know how much it is, because obviously the little threads and strands are so light. I found some numbers that are pretty impressive. It would take 70,000 of the actual flowers from the crocus. And from that, you would end up with over 200,000 of the actual stigmas, because there's 3 per each flower. And out of that, it would equal about 1 pound. And in cashmere, if they were the top prime ones, it would be probably anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 for that pound worth.
Whew. Not inexpensive, that's for sure. It's
So
making
just to have that many
crocus and
flowers,
caviar look cheap.
yeah. And when they're actually planted too, they plant them pretty well spread out. So it's not a densely populated thing, and the soil conditions have to be just right. Obviously there's terroir, just like there is for our wonderful grapes here. So a lot of the growing conditions and things are affected from that. So now a little bit more of that extra, the lemon oil. Here's some beautiful crostini that you can garnish with. Nice and crispy and contrast there. If you wanted to, you could soak up all the juices. Otherwise, go straight in for a wonderful piece of sourdough. That nice tang and that culture in there was really fantastic from that sourdough starter. So hopefully you enjoy this and give it a try. Mussels are a fantastic substitute. There's no reason why they can't work. I love those as well. And if you are allergic to mollusks and you can't have bivalves, you could definitely do some shrimp in here, try some other type of seafood. Just adjust the cooking time accordingly to depending on what kind of seafood you want to give a try at.
Yeah, definitely some on the chat. We did see some mussels and some combinations of seafood, as well as scallops that looked really
Absolutely.
amazing. Just stunning, Todd.
Thank you.
And another question that came in on the chat was other uses for the preserved lemons.
Oh, so now a lot of times they might be steeped into some rice. So if you were to make some rice pilaf, you can get some nice little pop of flavor. They do have that salty edge to them because they're cured. So you can use that in there if you were to chop it up and put that into your rice dish. You know, there's folding it into maybe some risotto. There's all different types of things that you can do, especially if you wanted to maybe take some of it and put it into a blender, and you can emulsify and make a creamy lemon preserved lemon vinaigrette. Extra virgin olive oil, maybe some shallots or garlic. You can add some of the actual juice, some of this, just a little bit, leave the salt off, but use some of this salty acidic juice that you have there as part of your balance in your vinaigrette. And then just kind of emulsify it from there. Use your little blender, your stick blender, and then just get it to go from there. I really enjoy that kind of flavor and that aroma that you pick up in salad dressings when I use that. So
great tip. I do love it in salad dressings, and I've done some just poached chicken for a little healthier dinner salad, and put some just strips of it as you have, and then also included in the dressing is another favorite for me. But lots of great tips. Other, you know, share with us places you love to go for clams. We love the Old Ebbitt Grill there on the East Coast. Elliott's Oyster House in Seattle. Hamma Oysters is a great place to also order Manila clams if you'd like for yourself, if you're here on the West Coast, or visit them. Or Bistro Don Giovanni in the Napa Valley, fantastic spaghetti and clams. So do watch out for your fantastic sustainable seafood. Share with us where you like to enjoy it, because it's a great opportunity. We're almost here at the end of the month for the photo competition for #enjoy, #Saint-Supéry if you're on Instagram. Just by using both of those hashtags, you'll get entered into our contest. You could win a great all-clad pot this month. Just post it to our Facebook page on Facebook if you enter that way. But we really want to know what brings you joy. If it's this wonderful dish with Chef Todd and a glass of wine, if it's playing Frisbee with your dog, or climbing a mountain, or actually just getting to see a friend live and in person with your mask on 6 feet away, all of that is bringing us joy. And there's great prizes next month too, so don't miss out on that. And next week, we are going to do the Dollarhide Estate Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon, prepping what you need to know for that Valentine's dinner. And also we're going to have Poet Sylvie on. Those of you who have been with us at the winery around Valentine's Day have had the amazing experience with Poet Sylvie. She'll ask you a few questions and create a truly moving and thoughtful poem for the one you love. We are offering that individual poem to you with a special meeting with her coming up for the first few folks who buy our Valentine's gift pack. So it's a very nice special way to say that you love someone. If you don't have a way with words, Poet Sylvie is here to help you. And so are we. So we look forward to seeing you for that next week. And we thank you so much for joining us again here tonight. And we hope you have some fun this next week. Be well, be kind, and cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining us.